Hey guys, welcome back to the People's Podcast. We haven't been dropping videos in a while, so today I just decided to do a quick run up of the Sri Lanka situation. If you are new here, you know what to do. Please like, subscribe, and comment because I'm gonna need you guys to tell me what you think of the story and if you knew about the story before you saw it here. And honestly, the reason why I decided to cover this story, I feel like it's a cautionary tale for everyone in the world, and specifically and most importantly, a cautionary tale for us here at home in South Africa, because I will read the story about Sri Lanka and tell you guys what happened, and I will point out some of the indicators that shows how a country goes from being stable to literally being in the toilet and being bankrupt and being moving from relatively having enough food to feed everyone and not even having food, having to stretch out your meals in order to ensure that you sustain yourself for a longer period of time. So I really do think this is a cautionary tale. And for everyone who watches this, please let's engage on it and tell me what you guys think. Do you think we will become like Sri Lanka one day after reading this? But yeah, so a few weeks ago, pictures and video surfaced of people protesting in Sri Lanka. And then we had news that the protests have led to certain political changes. And political changes, I mean the president as well as the prime minister quit. And why do we have prime minister and president in one country? I mean, government waste, and unnecessary bureaucrats. But anyway, let me digress. So then later on, we saw other videos surfaced of people at the president's house chilling in his pool, eating his food at his house. So, but let me give you guys the details of what happened in Sri Lanka. Let me explain the videos that you've seen all over social media. And I'm going to read on the AP, the Associated Press, and I'll leave the description and I'll leave the link in the description box so that you guys can read the story on your own. But this is what happened. It's like I said, it's a story on the AP. The title is "What's Happened and What's Next in Sri Lanka." So, Sri Lanka's president, who had announced he would resign on Wednesday, has fled the country after months of turmoil, culminated in protest converging on the presidential palace. Here's what's happening in Sri Lanka. The country is heading towards bankruptcy. Daily essentials such as food and medicines are scarce. Political corruption has deepened mistrust in the government. Double whammy of government and economic instability further complicating the recovery. So these are the points that we're going to discuss. So these are the things that are currently happening in Sri Lanka. No food, no medicine, recipe for disaster. So what happened? So Sri Lanka's prime minister, who said he will step down after a new government is installed, says the island's national debt-landed economy has collapsed as it runs out of money to pay for food and fuel and medicine. It's been relying on the help from neighboring India, China, and from obviously the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Outgoing prime minister, who took office in May, was emphasizing the monumental task he faces in turning the country as well as the economy around. He indicated that the country is heading towards rock bottom. Sri Lankans are skipping meals as they endure shortages, lining up for hours to try to buy scarce fuel and cooking gas. The harsh reality of a country whose economy had been growing quickly with a growing and comfortable middle class until the latest crisis deepened. Here's the situation in Sri Lanka. So I'm just going to stop right there, guys, so that we can talk about this a little bit. Political corruption is one of the main things that leads to poverty. Do you guys see what I'm trying to say when I say this is a cautionary tale for us specifically here in South Africa? We know, everyone knows how pervasive corruption is in this country. So we really need to be careful, and we need to look at other countries, look at historical situations that has happened that led to collapse of countries, and really need to apply in those lessons to our current situations here in South Africa. But we will have this full conversation after I have read the crisis in Sri Lanka. So let's really let me read to you guys let me try to capture the crisis in Sri Lanka. Government owes 51 billion and it is unable to make interest payments on its loan, let alone put a dent on the amount borrowed. Tourism, an important engine of the economy, has collapsed because of obviously the pandemic and concerns about safety after terror attacks that happened in Sri Lanka in 2019. These were widely covered where, obviously a lot of people died. The currency has collapsed by 80%. And I think this is against the dollar, making imports more expensive and worsening inflation that is already out of control, with food costs rising 57% according to official data. The finance minister of Sri Lanka has only $25 million in its usable foreign reserves. It needs 6 billion to stay afloat over the next 6 months. This is a country in disarray. If you are owing 51 billion, unable to make interest, let's say the interest, the yearly interest that you have to pay is 10%. 10% of 51 billion, it's 51 million. And they only have 25 million. And remember, guys, the 25 million is not only going to be used, obviously, against the interest. They cannot pay that because they cannot afford it. It has to be used against other service delivery, buying food, medicine, fuel, all these other things. They need 6 billion to just stay afloat for the next 6 months. The result is a country on the edge of bankruptcy with hardly any money to import gasoline, milk, cooking gas, medicine, and even toilet paper. The situation is so dire that the country cannot afford toilet paper. And they said it's on edge of bankruptcy. I mean, really, edge? I mean, at this point, this country's financial situation is in the toilet. They are bankrupt. They are broke, to use a term that we will mostly rely, it will obviously communicate the message here well. So what role did politics play in this crisis? And I want you to pay close attention to this. Economists say that the crisis stems from domestic factors such as years of mismanagement and corruption. I want us to stop there. Mismanagement and corruption. Guys, we know the situation here in South Africa. We know the fruitless and wasteful expenditure that is calculated by auditors during the year. We are aware of the level of mismanagement that happens in this country. We are aware of the corruption, how people get tenders, how people get quotations, how people deliver to the government, how businesses operate. We know the scope of corruption that's in this country, and we also understand the scope of the mismanagement. And we know now that these things collapse countries, and it did with Sri Lanka. So we should really be careful about how we proceed in this country, given that we know that when you put these two things together, they result in an apocalyptic situation that's happening right now in Sri Lanka. And we as a country need to really learn from these situations and start, as voters specifically, start to vote in a way that rebukes the government and calls the government out, calls the government officials, the municipalities, everyone involved in the bureaucracy, to tell them and send a very strong message that we are done with corruption and mismanagement, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we cannot afford toilet paper. But let me just read a little more so that we can understand here. So the problem obviously resulted with President Rajapaksa and his brother, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Can you imagine this? The president and the prime minister are related, blood relatives. They are siblings. I mean, and we have these kind of situations where families want to be dynasties. You know what dynasties are? Obviously, powerful families that ruled the country forever. That's exactly the situation that happened here. So what did this Rajapaksa combination do? This is one of the first thing that they did. Rajapaksa suddenly banned import of chemical fertilizers. The push for organic farming caught farmers by surprise and decimated staple rice crops, driving prices higher. I mean, we all understand right now. Yes, it's obviously it looks like a good thing, right? When you ban chemical fertilizers and moving towards more organic food, that looks like a good thing. But mass production, as we know now, depends on chemical fertilizers. You cannot produce anything in mass without that's just how the world is now. Instead of banning them outright, you can do an alternative farming where people use organic fertilizers. You don't ban it right away, because if you do, the supply dwindles, and what happens if the demand stays the same? The prices go up, and that's exactly what happened. So the government needed to boost its revenue as foreign debt was increasing. So the government obviously instituted the Rajapaksa instituted an infrastructure project that they could not afford, and they did this. They instituted the largest tax cuts Sri Lanka has ever seen in 2009. And then what happened after that? Creditors downgraded Sri Lanka's ratings, blocking them from borrowing more money. And obviously, if you are prohibited from borrowing money, what happens to your foreign reserves? They sank. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm just going to stop here with the story. And like I said, you can read everything for yourself on the description. I'll put the link there. Guys, this is a cautionary tale for not only South Africa but for the world. Tax cuts are a bad idea, and we did tax cuts as well in South Africa. Well, not the biggest tax cuts, but we did cut taxes for businesses when we moved our tax rates around from 28 to 27. The corporate tax rate, it only helps businesses, but obviously the government has to recoup money from somewhere. Where is it going to recoup? Personal income tax is going to recoup it from VAT or sales tax, as some you might know it. Which obviously those will affect the regular people, but the corporations will continue to run out of the back door with the money. As you guys know, the highest tax rate in South Africa for individuals is 45%, but businesses only get to pay 28%, and they make the most money. So, but obviously it's always pitched, tax cuts are always pitched as, we want to encourage businesses to invest, foreign direct investment, FDI, and all of these things. But when you cut taxes for the richest people in the country, you are forcing the poorest people in the country to pick up the burden, and that's exactly something that you shouldn't do as a country. But let me just move away from the complex tax situation and just talk about how we as a country need to pay more and more attention to who our leaders are. We as young people need to stop this, because in South Africa what we have now is a situation where every young person goes to university or goes to college or whatever and works hard for themselves and their family to try and not be affected by the corruption. But when a country collapses, it becomes so bad that it doesn't matter whether you're a middle class or a poor class or whatever. Everyone gets affected, because like we said, we are a global community. We have to import certain stuff. When a country cannot do that anymore due to its weak currency, whether you are middle class or what, you are inevitably going to get affected. So what we do need to do, we need to start engaging in these situations. We need to start voting. We need to start politically being active, voting, as well as also ensuring that we give up this mentality of us that we can work ourselves. We can work so hard that corruption won't affect us, because cups are situations like this where everyone gets affected by a country that's mismanaged, and a country that cannot pay its debt, a country that doesn't have a foreign currency that's viable, or a foreign currency that's able to import fuel and all the other essentials. So I am hoping that we see this story specifically as a cautionary tale, and we apply the lessons from this story in our own reality, so that we can ensure that we do not face a situation like this. Because as we know, And I wanted to pull out the stats here so that I can show you that South Africa, honestly, it's a house of cards. We are also currently experiencing high levels of inflations, wages not increasing at the same rate as inflation. Fuel prices are through the roof, affecting everyone with or without a car, because as we know, when fuel goes up, it has what we call a multiplier effect, and it affects everything that has to be transported anywhere. So we are also, to some extent, maybe a smaller scale, facing the similar situations that this country is facing. But this really then should warn us to pick better leaders so that they can be prepared for situations like this. But I'm just gonna stop it there, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Please share the video, subscribe to the channel, like, comment. I really like interacting with you guys. My name is Tapelo Mere. Check out the rest of the videos that are gonna come after this one, and you can check out the channel. We have wonderful things there. We've covered all things. We cover all things political, social, fun stuff. Thank you guys for watching.